read out what they've provided us with. Please ensure my name is not exposed, as I have an uncommon name. I apologise for this coming in so late. I'm a photographer on the side and I've been at a birth all day, but I really want to share my story. Firstly, to every single one of you brave enough to be here today, I applaud you. When I was asked to speak here before you today, I immediately felt overjoyed, slightly overwhelmed, but for most part excited to share with you all that are standing here why this fight is so critical. And then the reality set in, the cold, harsh reality that I can't, due to work and family reasons, freely and openly address you here on this stage in person. The current climate regarding medical freedom is so volatile and fueled by anger, ridiculous propaganda, and there is a real threat to safety. So much so, I can't even share my story or my concerns over our current legislation without fear of backlash. Just let that sit with you for a moment. An Australian citizen cannot share her story for fear of backlash. That's not a democratic country. That's not a free country. I am an ex-vaxxer, and I would even have once proudly announced myself as a pro-vaxxer. I certainly wouldn't have ever envisioned myself on a platform demanding that my voice be heard, pleading that I could be the one to make the medical decisions over my children and my body. You know, I used to be afraid of unvaccinated children because I didn't know any better. I would arrive on time every single scheduled date for their vaccines. My family got their shots without question. But when not only myself and then my precious babies had a reaction after all of the medications, vaccines included, they come with risks, side effects, and possible long-term issues. Like any people, I had looked to my entire life to help me and my family. I wasn't satisfied with the blow-offs, the short answers, and the dismissive nature of my concerns. So I kept hunting, because I knew in myself what I had seen with my own eyes, and I knew there was more to this story than what I was being told. We all have a story, all of us here, don't we? Most of us has ended up here today because we've seen with our own eyes what can happen and what goes wrong when it does go wrong. This leads me to my final thoughts. We live in Australia, the land of the young, the land of the free. But how free are we really? The government works for us, and yet they are forgetting the people who have given them their power. Medical freedom is a human right, and it is horrifying in 2019 in Australia we are fighting for our very basic right to body autonomy. Guys, bit more than that. It's the time to push back, and that time is now. And I applaud you all for doing that as well on my behalf. It is not when they are forcibly injecting your child. It is not when you're being coerced into medical treatment and you do not feel comfortable accepting. It is not when they start tearing children away from their parents for the greater good. Australia was founded on horror scenes of a government abusing their power and pulling children from the arms of their mothers. That soon enough could be replaying out into us. Under a different narrative, it is time to rise up, and we must take back our human rights, our power. We must not sit back and be complacent hoping for the best. We must be loud, we must be proud, and we must be clear. I hope that my physical absence does not water down my words, but only gives them depth, power, and demonstrates ever so clearly how important this fight is. For every person listening who is unaware of just how out of control this situation has become, my absence, my fear, My need to protect myself simply for having an informed opinion should send shivers down your spine. You are not free. We are not free. And we must stand up and be heard. Now, the person who that story belongs to, she doesn't just have a vaccine injury of her own, her children are also vaccine injured. It is multi-generational in her family. Now, we have a very important guest speaker that I would like to call to the stage. Most people know who she is. She's an absolute powerhouse. She has worked diligently for many, many years. WA would like to welcome Dr. Judy Wilman to the stage. Applause for this lady. Dr. Wilman has been persecuted relentlessly by the media, by organisations and by the government, to the point where certain organisations actually lobbied the university where she received her thesis to try and have it banned and taken off. Well, we all know how hard it is to get a thesis, especially on such a controversial subject. So we respect and we applaud Dr. Wilman for standing up here today.
Thank you everyone who has turned out today and braved this climate that we have in Australia today. And to oppose the no jab, no play. Right, let's be quite clear. This is a bill that removes a parent's right to decide what you inject into their body, and it gives this right to the government. We have lost bodily autonomy in Australia without any discussion or public participation in this debate. So we are standing here today to fight for medical freedoms. This is a medical tyranny. And we are here today to tell you that the people of Western Australia do not consent to this policy. I will explain to you why this policy is invalid and why we will have this policy disapproved. So we need everybody to publicly support our rallies, and I say hello to all the thousands of people that are watching this on Facebook because they are too frightened of their jobs and employment situations to be able to come out and speak with us today. So let's talk about what this no jab, no play means for parents in Western Australia. Let me tell you, you have been let down seriously by the West Australian media and all mainstream media. They did not report on the detail of this bill as it was discussed in Parliament by the politicians in June and July. And their journalists didn't even know how many vaccines are now required for children to enter a childcare centre or kindergarten in Western Australia. So let's discuss what it means to be unvaccinated in 2019. In 2019, this policy means that no child can participate in early childhood education or normal socialisation situations without receiving 16 vaccines. These are vaccines that the adults standing before me have never had. That is what it means when people refer to an unvaccinated person now. So, if the people before me have never used these 16 vaccines, how could they have been used with a 95% uptake rate to create herd immunity to control these diseases? The simple answer is they didn't. And the West Australian government has not provided any evidence that any one of those 16 vaccines will create herd immunity with an uptake rate of 95%, because it's never been done. As this bill was discussed in Parliament, there was the informed parents' position on this bill was not represented in the Parliament. And for the last 10 to 15 years, we have heard the media discussing religious rights and freedom of speech and academic freedom. When did you ever see a discussion in the mainstream media in Australia on the removal of medical freedoms and bodily integrity in Australia? Has the mainstream media in Australia covered that issue? Was it covered in the last 2 months as the West Australian government bulldozed this policy through the Parliament with literally only 6 days of discussion? No. The parents of WA have not been informed that bodily integrity was removed, and the citizens of Australia were not informed by the mainstream media in 2016 that our religious freedom to refuse a vaccine was withdrawn at that time as well. So we no longer have the religious freedom to decide what we inject into our bodies, philosophical freedom, conscientious objection, or medical exemptions. In 2016, the medical profession removed the exemptions that related to family history and the known neurological damage and autoimmune diseases that many people in our population are susceptible to due to the chemicals in the vaccines. So this is what we call a medical tyranny. Australia has arrived at having a government who has a medical tyranny over our bodies without any media discussion. The media has let us down. Did you know that in Western Australia, since 2016, you can now be stripped and forcibly vaccinated without your consent and without a warrant being needed to come onto your property? Have you been informed of that inclusion in and hence this policy is invalid because they've removed the public voice from this policy, and we will be following this with legal action. So our right to choose how many vaccines we use has been removed along with fully informed consent without any discussion by the public. Or the academic literature has been suppressed, and on many occasions I have been informed that I'm not allowed to speak on council venues. So there is a censorship in Australia on a very important issue of human rights, and we have arrived at this point where we must fight strongly for these rights now. And this is due to the false and misleading information that our West Australian and mainstream media is providing due to the influence of medical industry lobby groups that are now very powerful in our country with our politicians and our media. So over the last decade, the government brought in the No Jab, No Pay in 2016, and now we have the No Jab, No Play in 2019, and there's been no increased risk from these diseases. Nothing has changed, it's just the government saying, well, we now mandate 16 vaccines for your children to participate in society. And soon that will be for adults as well, unless you join this movement and ensure that your family and friends do not see this as the media is trying to frame it. They have framed it as an anti-vaccination debate, and they are stigmatising anybody who stands up for fully informed consent to vaccination, medical freedom. So we must ensure that the media listens to the informed public and starts to present this issue as it should be, as medical freedom and our right to bodily autonomy. So it is the political system, it is the institutional barriers in our political system that has enabled the government to arrive at this point of medical tyranny. So we are here today to say that as our voice was not represented in the Parliament, as this policy was bulldozed through in 6 days, we do not consent to this policy. And a very critical fact to show that this policy is invalid is the fact that children's health has declined as each vaccine has been added to this schedule. This is not a policy about health. And Mark McGowan's government and the Australian Medical Association did not provide any evidence that using 16 vaccines in children will make them healthier, because the evidence is overwhelming over the last 2 decades. Children are sicker. We have 10% of children, the increase in anaphylaxis and allergies and autoimmune diseases. We now actually have 45% of children with a long-term chronic illness, and this is not normal. So until the government provides evidence that children will be healthier by using 16 vaccines with chemicals in them that you're not told are being injected into their bodies, then we do not consent to this policy. There is an epidemic of chronic illness in our children and in the community, and this cannot be ignored any longer. This chronic illness is directly related in a dose-response relationship to the expansion of the schedule from 1990 onwards. And we want the link to vaccines investigated with this chronic illness before any government claims that these vaccines are safe and effective, because our children are sicker, they are not healthier, and we know of many children that have died from vaccines and that are not being reported by the West Australian media because of the bias presented through the corporate sponsored media. Many of you who followed this debate as the No Jab No Play went through the Parliament, you'll be aware that the informed parents of Western Australia provided Mark McGowan and Roger Cook, Simone McGurk and Sue Ellery with 5 questions that we need the answers to before you mandate any vaccine in a community, or before you remove a healthy child from the classroom. To claim that you're removing them because they're unvaccinated by an arbitrarily determined definition of vaccination, that now means you haven't had 16 vaccines. Grandparents, it does not mean that they haven't had 1 or 2 vaccines. Please be aware that it means they haven't had 16 vaccines or 53 doses from boosters, etc. So the informed parents of WA provided Mark McGowan with 5 questions, and specifically we wanted the evidence that the unvaccinated children in our population are getting these cases of diseases and not the vaccinated children, because the scientific journals and all the outbreaks of the diseases are occurring in many vaccinated children. So we asked Mark McGowan to provide this evidence, the evidence that it is only the unvaccinated children getting these diseases. He did not provide that evidence. It was not provided in the Parliament to support this policy. Similarly, we asked for the evidence that using those 16 vaccines with an uptake rate of 95% has been used in any community to control these 16 diseases. That evidence was also not provided, because none of these vaccines have been used with a 95% uptake rate in any community to control these diseases, in any country. The diseases in infectious diseases in developed countries The risk declined before these vaccines were introduced. Many of them have only been introduced since the late 2000s, from 2000 onwards. These are recent vaccines that were not responsible for the decline in risk from these infectious diseases. So until Mr. McGowan can provide the evidence that a 95% uptake rate is needed to eliminate these diseases, and until he can provide evidence that an unvaccinated child is more at risk than a vaccinated child from getting these diseases, can I suggest we go back to how we did control these diseases and remove the people that have these diseases from the classroom and get them to stay at home until they're no longer communicable. The suggestion that in 2019 that we need to remove healthy children from the classroom is something out of 1984. It does not make any sense. There is no need to forcibly vaccinate any person. Your bodily integrity can remain intact because quarantining people who have a disease or even are suspected of having a disease works. You remove the person for however many days is required, and that when they're not communicable, they can then rejoin the community. But at this stage, there is no scientific evidence to support a no jab, no play or a no jab, no pay policy. And let me remind you, vaccinations in Australia have always been voluntary and always been a choice. And there has been no increased risk from these diseases in 2019 in a developed country like Australia. I would like to explain to you further the reasons why we believe, I'll just summarise for you the reasons why this policy is invalid. Firstly, the policy has not been demonstrated to improve children's health. The opposite is true. Children's health has significantly declined as every vaccine has been added. So Mr. McGowan needs to address that before you consent to having any catch-up schedules or having any vaccines at all. Secondly, the available evidence shows clearly that this policy will harm people. We are a genetically diverse population, and contraindications prior to 1990 and even 2016 always referred to family history and your genetics. Many neurological and autoimmune diseases are linked to genetics. There is no one-size-fits-all. And if you know what is in a vaccine, if you know what chemicals are in a vaccine, then you do need to be concerned. And like any medical procedure, any advice that you get about using a drug or a medical intervention must be specified to the individual. So there is evidence that this policy will cause severe harm in the population, and we need to make sure this policy is disapproved. And thirdly, this policy discriminates against healthy children in early childhood education and socialisation. And for what purpose? Why are healthy children the ones that you're removing from the classroom? Let's go back to the old days, as I said before, and let's remove the cases of these diseases from the classroom and prevent the transmission in the community. And lastly, the West Australian politicians have used false and misleading information in the Parliament to debate this topic. My PhD would not be sitting on the University of Wollongong's website if that was not a fact. They are standing by the rigour of that research because it provided the evidence that the government has not done the safety science to claim that using 16 vaccines injected into an infant body whose body systems are not developed is safe. The clinical trials have not used any inert placebos. They are the placebos that have no effect in the body, and therefore you cannot claim that is a safety trial. And let me just remind you that the government only uses clinical trial science that has been funded by the pharmaceutical companies, and that allows them to have influence in the design of these trials. This was a complex piece of public health policy that, as I've mentioned, was pushed through the Parliament in only 6 days. This is not good enough. That is not scrutiny, and the informed public want to be involved in this debate. So I'd just like to inform you, what can parents do to maintain your right to choose what you inject into your children's body? Don't give that right to the government. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are 100 more vaccines being developed. How many more will they add to the schedule? How many more are you prepared to inject into your children and into yourselves, because it is coming for adults? So my first suggestion, please be brave and challenge the policies. Don't rise to the fear that is being presented to you through sensational articles in the West Australian media that is only presenting anecdotal evidence, not scientific evidence on this issue, and is only presenting one side of the issue and ridiculing the scientific community that questions the use of 16 vaccines in the body by calling us anti-vaxxers. I mean, that is completely against scientific methodology. What medical intervention do you know that you're allowed to dismiss the risks of that procedure by claiming it to be anti the procedure? We need a proper media in Australia. We need the mainstream media to be representing the public's voice on this issue, which is medical freedom. Freedom of choice in all medical interventions with fully informed consent. And let me tell you, it is not just 3,700 people that the West Australian would like you to think is affected by this policy or is fighting. We are not a minority. If this issue is framed properly to the West Australian people and to the Australian public, 24 million people in Australia would be supporting our right to medical freedom, not medical tyranny, and our right to fully informed consent in this procedure. So, I'm saying to you, please challenge your childcare centres, your employers when they ask you to have 16 vaccines. We need to get this into the courts. That's what the government doesn't want, because they won't win this argument. Can I explain to you that this policy breaches medical ethics, the ethical conduct of doctors to provide information in the public's best interest. That is breached. The Hippocratic Oath. Human rights is breached. The Australian Immunisation Handbook Directive to doctors is breached, because vaccines should not be given with any coercion, manipulation or pressure. The science is false. The politicians in this country presented false and misleading information in the Parliament to pass this bill, so we need to get it into the courts. Please, if you've got any lawyers that will assist with this, get in touch with them and please send them to us. But please challenge the policies. Secondly, join the Informed Perth Parents Group, which is Citizens for Health Awareness. We have a Facebook group. Please sign up to that newsletter so that you can be kept informed of our future rallies and events that we will be doing. This will be continual, because the informed parents do not consent to these policies. Remember, your health, your quality of life is dependent upon your health. If you are fearful, if you are choosing to have a catch-up schedule of 16 vaccines, based on fear and not scientific evidence, let me assure you that many of these reactions, they won't necessarily come out immediately. They will be months or even years later. The diabetes and thyroidism and autoimmune diseases, the chronic illness, the cancer, they come out later in life, and your quality of life is dependent upon everything you inject into your body. So don't make that decision lightly. Don't capitulate just because it's easier and you need the care to actually go to work. I mean, that is a tragedy that the government is bribing you with that in the first place. Let's fight it. Right, everybody here can form your own local parent groups so you can support each other and support each other's friends while we fight this issue. Support each other's children while we fight this issue so that you can go to work and share the childcare while we talk to the childcare centres and get them to be informed of our medical freedoms and our rights. So make your own local groups and don't give in to the bullying campaign through the media and the doctors' surgeries when you take your sick children there. Also, you can start your own newsletters by email. Because the media and the doctors are not giving you this scientific information, if you have access to some of this science, set up your own email and start to forward it to friends and family that are open to it and keep them informed as well. And also visit my website, Vaccination Decisions, which also provides you not only with some of this information and academic studies, but also it provides you with other websites of doctors and professionals, health professionals who are speaking up on this issue. Please also remember, if you do not fight this policy now with your employment or your children and childcare, this will be expanded further to adults, and discrimination will continue in other social service areas. So we do need to act now, and so long as we get the support, we will be doing more of these sorts of protests and rallies and providing to you all the stories of the damage, the vaccine injury that the media, the mainstream media, is preventing you from seeing, and the Australian government has censored in many ways. So please join us in standing up for our medical freedom in Australia and demand the evidence for this policy in Western Australia. It has not been provided in the passing of this bill, which is now resulting in discriminatory and harmful practices to our children. Okay, so please speak up. Thank you.